To write a successful series finale is one of the toughest things to do. You've got to make it a suitable ending, making it feel much bigger and more important than a regular episode. You've also got to pay off character journeys in a satisfying way, so there's a lot to deal with. Sticking the landing has always been one of the things Chris Chibnall has struggled with, often rushing his endings. Indeed, the Torchwood Series 1 finale End of Days was a bit of a mess, shoehorning in a giant monster right at the end, utterly derailing the story. However, when it came to the following Series 2 finale, to say Chibnall learned from his mistakes would be a bit of an understatement. This finale, titled Exit Wounds, sees the return of the villainous Captain John, who seeks to destroy Captain Jack's life from the inside out by dismantling his team and destroying Cardiff. So, tasked with wrapping up multiple story arcs and writing out two much loved characters, how was Chibnall able to craft one of the most beloved and borderline flawless Torchwood episodes? Well, grab your riff manipulator and try not to get swarmed by weevils, because it's time to take a very deep dive into the end of the Torchwood era.
Go on then, stop me. I hope you can.
Torchwood Series 1 and 2 never really had two-parters, since every story was pretty much standalone, even the Owen trilogy of Series 2. However, the exceptions to that rule are both finales. Captain Jack Harkness led into End of Days with the opening of the Rift, but Fragments is a much clearer and more direct lead into its associated finale. Indeed, rather than picking up the next day, Exit Wounds begins immediately after Fragments, which is why I find it weird that they didn't air these final two episodes together like they had done with the Series 1 finale. I just think that's a big missed opportunity. I do like how Exit Wounds starts though. Thanks to Captain John's explosive trap, the team are in complete disarray, even having to awkwardly squeeze into Reese's car. The stakes are astronomically high, which I simply adore. Much like End of Days, there's rift activity all over the city causing chaos. But this time, rather than it being the result of the team trying to look out for each other, it's the master plan of Captain John, who is trying to cripple both Torchwood, Cardiff, and take everything away from Jack. It creates a power dynamic. Right from the get-go, we know who the villain is and what he's capable of. So there is an already established villain, meaning the narrative can just get its head down and forge ahead. Indeed, Jack returns to the hub to confront Captain John. This confrontation is wonderfully tense, very reminiscent of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. These are two characters with a long and storied history. They know everything about each other, right down to their weaknesses, so it's immediately clear to both the Torchwood team and the viewer that everything around them is a trap. That doesn't stop Jack believing he can reason with his former partner though. Everything that's happening is essentially Jack's fault, albeit unintentionally. By turning down Captain John, Jack has unknowingly incurred his fellow ex-time agent's wrath, plunging the city into this chaos because John is doing all this out of petty revenge. That's all this is, which is deeply disturbing. He's like a child, simply jealous that Jack won't spend time with him.
Why are you here? Well, see? Now you're interested in me.
One of the centres of rift activity is the police station, where Andy has been dealing with a sudden weevil invasion, the monsters killing the foremost senior officers in the building in a targeted attack. I think it's a great combination, bringing everything full circle in a way. It was one of the first locations in the show, back when Gwen was an officer with Andy, along with the weevils being the first monster we encountered, so it's a nice touch to reunite them, harkening back to that very beginning. It also drives home how deadly all this rift activity is, that the weevils can easily spring up in one of the most secure locations in the city and send the entire police force into disorganised panic. It gives you a sinking realisation that this is all just part of the plan. John is trying to take out the entire city piece by piece, including a Hoyks in the hospital and ancient monks in the server rooms that power all of the important facilities of Cardiff. He's just that powerful and prepared, which is terrifying. Although I do like this Raiders of the Lost Ark levity here.
There we are then.
Sorted.
In a largely humourless episode, small moments like these do so much to keep it from being a complete onslaught of crushing losses and failures. Indeed, just as things seem to be under control, John makes the team watch as he detonates bombs across the city. This moment is great, making the protagonists feel so small and helpless. They are the protectors of Cardiff. They're meant to stop people like John, but they're forced to stand there as he rips apart everything they know and everything they love. It's the most danger the city has ever been in because the threat has actually being carried out. Before, they always managed to stop the alien menaces before they could attack, but this time they weren't, and the consequences are severe. Countless innocent lives are paying the price for Torchwood's existence, so it's the perfect frame for the narrative. They're utterly lost without their leader and no idea how to deal with all of this. It truly is the biggest scale the show has seen, so I think this single scene does a perfect job of upping the ante and skyrocketing the stakes from the ending of Fragments, the team just scrambling desperately to do whatever they can. After detonating the bombs, John teleports Jack into the distant past, where he reveals he himself is a walking bomb, actually working for a mysterious higher power. I really like this twist because it keeps you on your toes and disorientates you as a viewer. We thought we knew exactly what was going on here. We assumed that John was the big bad villain unleashing all this death and destruction because Jack won't pay attention to him. But now we have no idea what's happening, we're as lost as the protagonists are, so it keeps the narrative interesting to follow. However, Jack is then finally reunited with his brother Gray. The siblings embrace him for the first time since they were children. It's a touching and cathartic moment. All throughout series 2, Jack has mourned this loss, the grief eating him up inside since he considers himself responsible, so it's really nice to see him finally reunite with his brother. So this also makes it all the more shocking that Grace stabs Jack and buries him alive to be forgotten under the city, forcing him to resurrect for eternity in the ultimate torture chamber. I think it's a brilliant idea to make Gray the true villain. Not only is it a great twist, it's also a good way to explore and justify Jack's guilt, since Gray holds him accountable for what happened. By letting go of his hand, Jack unknowingly subjected Gray to years of torture at the hand of the unnamed creatures. He lived every horrifying day in desperate hope his brother would come back for him, but he didn't. It's an understandable motive. I could see it as being viewed as misguided, but it's important to note the conditions Gray was kept in. He was chained and forced to watch everyone around him die slow and agonising deaths at the hands of these creatures. So over the years, the hope would have turned to anger directed at Jack, since such a small slip of the hand was the reason he found himself there. He's not just some spoiled brat blaming his brother for some small slight. He is a tortured prisoner of war, almost living off his hatred, in a way becoming one of the monsters he was captured by, since he had to experience their torture for so long it influenced him.
The only strength I have is my hatred for you.
Gray is a good villain for the piece, creating personal stakes for Jack as a character and giving him yet another reason to hate himself, knowing he created this monster and also knowing Gray will never forgive him. Amidst all the chaos, there's a really nice scene as Reese comforts Gwen, who as usual is putting on a brave front, but inside is shaken and lost. She may be second in command, but this is more than she has ever had to deal with, and there's no one to help her. She has to find a way to guide this team and the city itself through the crisis, but she doesn't know what to do without Jack. I don't think that takes anything away from her or devalues her as a character, since we saw in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang that she was doing a good enough job in his stead. Instead, it adds to the severity of the situation itself. She doesn't believe in herself, but thanks to Reese, she has an anchor to the world who does. Despite their arguments here and there, Reese is the most important thing in the world to Gwen. No matter what, he always stands by her when she really needs him. And this is another example of that, as he gives her a pep talk to prove she's capable of fixing all of this, since he knows all the incredible things she's done. Reese even tells her to go back to the hub so she can try finding Jack, even if that means leaving him and the police station undefended at the mercy of the Weevils. The major change in their dynamic is trust. Before Reese was let in on a Torchwood secret, he was paranoid and slighted by Gwen's mysterious job, which always got in the way. But now that he does know, he's aware of how much they need her. He trusts Gwen, so even if it means he'll be torn apart by Weevils alone, he's willing to let her go. It's an important character moment, showing how both of these people have grown personally, since this kind of interaction would have never happened in Series 1. But now they're so comfortable that they can make these decisions when they really need to. Despite being freed by Gray and told he can go anywhere he wants, Captain John chooses to return to the hub to help Torchwood. I quite like this act of redemption, proving he truly was forced to do all of this. Even though the team rightfully don't believe him at first, I think it's a good place to take the character. He may be a black-hearted villain, but he has changed since we last saw him, and now he wants to do the right thing. even if he still does have some of his darker tendencies. After all, he had asked to join Torchwood, so he is willing to walk the more honest path. I said it before, but I really wish we could have gotten more Captain John. He's a really complex character with a unique history and motivations, so it's a shame that he only properly appeared twice in the live action show, although Big Finish did give him a whole box set, which is a good use of their obsession with random spin-offs, although the same can't be said for the Lady Christina series. However, to make things worse for the protagonist, Grey sends out an ear-piercing signal to wake up all the Weevils in Cardiff and set them loose on the city, making it almost like some kind of zombie invasion. I really like this concept since it's simple yet effective. The Weevils are essentially the definitive torture monster, always being thrown in whenever the series needed a minor creature running around, so it makes sense that the finale would again call on them to boost them to their highest threat level. We know how dangerous one single Weevil is, since we've constantly seen them attacking, so the fact that there are so many of them all over the city makes you truly understand the danger. It's also a good touch that Owen's King of the Weevils status has a payoff. His resurrection made him immune to Weevils, which now allows him to safely and easily navigate the swarm streets to get to the nuclear power station. So I appreciate that they actually used that concept, since it didn't really make much sense in Dead Man Walking. However, just as John, Yanto and Gwen dispatch of Weevils within the hub, Grey suddenly arrives to lock them into the vaults. Usually I hate it when TV keeps beating down the protagonists and making them take L's every step of the way, but I think it's handled well in Exit Wounds. They have small victories throughout the narrative, which means whenever John or Grey show up to further escalate the problem, it doesn't feel frustrating. Instead, it rather keeps the story ticking along smoothly, maintaining the intensity well. It also means it's very shocking when Tosh is suddenly shot by Grey, who proceeds to rip out the power from her station, furthering the hopelessness of her situation, since she can no longer help Owen stop the reactor melting down. It continues to cement him as a big threat, since he's always one step ahead of them. He is not just some bitter guy angry at Jack. This is a villainous mastermind shaped by years of torture, so he knows how to inflict pain on them in return. However, despite being one step ahead, Grey is taken by surprise as a rhythmic banging begins in the hub, specifically the morgue, where he finds none other than his brother, who soon incapacitates him to stop this bloodshed. I really love the explanation of how Jack escaped his grave. We saw John throw a ring into the grave, later explaining that he did it to find the signal so they could all dig him up, but Chibnall misdirects you with that, since the signal doesn't appear, seemingly making it impossible to find Jack and continuing to make everything feel so futile and hopeless. However, the ring signal had worked, albeit a century early, Alice from Fragments tracking it and uncovering their own operative from a future. It's very Curse of Fatal Death, timey-wimey, but I think it's handled well. It's not like the resolution of Spyfall, it's done so much better, especially because we actually see the events playing out, along with paying off that earlier incarnation of Torchwood we were recently introduced to in Fragments. It's also quite powerful to realise that Jack still had to deal with centuries of the torture Grey wanted for him. He was buried in 27 AD and rescued in 1901, which means he spent around 1,874 years buried alive, constantly dying and resurrecting only to choke on dirt and die of dehydration and starvation. It's truly awful to imagine, but Jack considers it his penance for letting Grey go, and inadvertently turning his brother into a monster. It stops the signal from being a Deus Ex Machina removing stakes from the story, because you know he still had to go through hell just to get back to the Victorian age, where he could get frozen until modern day, just like Tommy had into The Last Man. It's a very clever twist to the storyline, although it makes it a bit funny that there were 3 different versions of Captain Jack during the events of Boomtown. If this was Stephen Moffat writing, we all know how that would end, don't we?
You think you've got problems? We've got to share a bed.
Even though Grey has been dealt with and the Weevils recalled to the sewers and the Torchwood hub where they came from, there are still massive stakes as Tosh is bleeding out trying to help Owen stop the nuclear reactor from melting down and flooding the city with radiation. It's a testament to her dedication to Torchwood that she was still focused on the wider mission rather than her own impending death. However, in the typical cruel Torchwood twist of fate, it turns out the meltdown can't be prevented, and Owen gets trapped, forced to vent the meltdown into the very room he's trapped inside. Now, usually I hate this whole somebody has to die trope, but I think it's pulled off perfectly in this episode. I love how he's angry at it. It's quite similar to the 10th Doctor's later outburst in a very similar situation.
Not like this! I'm not doing it! My reward. But it's not fair!
Owen has died once before and it terrified him. Even though his resurrection caused him to never truly live life again, he would still rather live that way than have to face the darkness again, which makes this moment extremely understandable. However, it's then that an entire series worth of character growth comes to fruition with this single line.
Because you're breaking my heart.
This tragic end for Owen and Tosh is the perfect climax for their shared journey. They've had their ups and downs as she desperately yearned for him and he never noticed in time. Ever since Dead Man Walking, they were never going to be able to be together, which both of them knew. It's a really heartbreaking moment, especially because of how Owen has developed as a person since his initial introduction. Their whole will they won't they storyline was a cornerstone of Series 2, but something always came up to keep them apart, so it's a cruel yet suitably climactic payoff to that story. The would-be lovers dying together but apart, kind of symbolising their pairing when you think about it. It's the true climax of the story, which actually subverts your expectations. There was no grand battle between Jack and Gray, no crazy rift explosion. It's instead the heroic sacrifices of Tosh and Owen, simultaneously wiping out 2/5 of the team in one fell swoop, which really shows how high stakes this finale is. There's no way to bring either back, no more resurrection gauntlets, no rift magic like the previous protagonist's death. It's just mortality, which I think is why the finale is so beloved, because it's all about characters, nothing more. It's all about the character journeys and how they react to these events, which is its greatest strength, showing once again that Chibnall can really write character drama perfectly as long as he's under a good executive producer. As the dust settles, Jack decides to freeze Gray in the desperate hope that one day he'll be forgiven for that fateful day. It's a powerful moment that shows how much Jack has been through. Everyone he loves always dies, just like New Year's Eve back in Fragments. He has to walk alone, so he can't bear to kill his own brother and continue this bloodshed. He's that desperate for someone to actually survive that he's willing to forgive Gray, despite, killing 2 of his friends. Ultimately, Jack ends the story alone. Even though he has Gwen and Yanto, he's just going to spend every day walking the emptier halls of the Torchwood Hub, seeing daily reminders of the teammates he lost, feeling personally responsible for everything that happened during this finale. The loss of Tosh and Owen is further driven home as the surviving trio have to pack away their things and log out their computers for good. It makes it feel more real by the minute, proving there's no way out this time. It's hard to imagine the agony Jack, Gwen and Yanto have to go through in this epilogue, since it's more than just a simple goodbye. They even have to watch a secret message Tosh left, telling them all how much he loved them, especially Owen, which is kind of awkward. It's logical that Tosh would leave such a message on the event of her death, given that she knew her way around the system, and thanks to Fragments, we also know how much Torchwood really meant to her. Jack saved her from the hell of the unit prison she was doomed to waste away in, so she, much like Owen, had been given a second chance at life, so to speak. I like that she acknowledges all of this, wanting to give a message to her teammates to help them accept her death and move on. I can't help but feel like this ending is a mirror of End of Days in a way, especially because it has the same kind of panning out crane shot of the hub. That previous finale ended with hope for the future. Even though Jack had gone missing, it felt triumphant and there was the promise of more adventure. This time, however, it closes on doubt and uncertainty, wondering if these 3 survivors can even keep going after everything they went through. I just really appreciate the parallels, ending the series on a much different, more pessimistic note, which kind of marries it a lot better to Children of Earth, linking them very strongly. I'm sure you've heard it plenty of times before, but it's hard to deny that Exit Wounds is an absolute masterpiece. It tells a compelling, big-time tale, while still avoiding all the pitfalls End of Days fell into. It keeps the story contained within the confines of character storytelling, not falling into the trap of some big, stompy monster trying to destroy the world. Instead, we see the Torchwood team spread thin and in disarray as they're forced to scramble to protect the city they serve. The pacing is absolutely perfect, constantly scaling the threats up with a flurry of new developments, along with the big, shocking twist of Gray being the true villain instead of Captain John. The acting all around is phenomenal, creating a number of memorable moments, especially the heart-shattering deaths of Tosh and Owen. It's a no-brainer that Exit Wounds gets an S rank on the Series 2 tier list. It's the perfect way to close out the series, using pre-established elements from a number of earlier episodes to form this tight narrative. Chibnall really outdoes himself, going from strength to strength, and you're constantly engaged, with Ben Foster's score being the ideal companion to some of the best sequences. They even find the time to sneak in a cheeky retcon confirming that Tosh was in Aliens of London, which is much appreciated since it was always a dangling question.
Or was it Space Pig?
Space Pig.
It's hard not to love Exit Wounds, since it really has everything you could have possibly asked for. It's such a good ending that makes you wonder how they could possibly top it. Well, I guess we'll have to see about that one then. And I'd like to thank my Platinum level patron Fallon Cortez, and all my Gold level patrons, Alex Marston, Calvin, Daniel Shilato, Franz Horn aka Line Vortex, George, Herna Verzog, James Alea Waterhouse, John, and Stephen Never Miller. Thank you so much for your support.